Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Everything Cooperative. This morning, we have the pleasure of having John Holdsclaw IV with us this morning. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Vernon. Always good to be with you.
It's great. It's great to have you on this morning again. I think you've been on 2, or has it been 3 times that you've been on the show?
It might be 4 times. I think 2 on my own, and then we had the tribute show, and then I think now, so 4
okay.
or 5. I might be number 1 on the leaderboard there, Vernon.
Okay.
Who knows?
So if anybody out there want to hear about John's previous shows, you can go to www.everything.coop and you can hear him. But right now, we're going to talk about a book that is out, Humanity at Work and Life. I wanted to say Humanity at Work and Play, but okay, Humanity at Work and Life. And John penned the 29th chapter, which is Financing Worker Cooperatives, Challenges and Opportunities. John, how did you get into that role?
Great question, Vernon. Let me first say something about the book. You know, we talk a lot about the world today and how we need to all come together and work together. I mean, you're talking about a book that had 36 contributors from 6 different countries on 3 continents, first of all. And so Dr. Chris Clamp, who was my former professor in grad school, had reached out to me, and Michael Peck, who are both the co-editors of the book, and had asked me about it. And I was honored that they would want me to include a chapter on worker co-ops. But the other great thing about it is that they gave me a little direction, but they supported me 100% in the direction that I tried to go. I probably have not done anything as challenging as this, because I tried to probably put in way too much into the chapter, but at the same time, when they both approached me and asked me to be a part of this incredible effort, there was no way that I could say no.
29th chapter. So what's your background that would cause you to be able to write about financing worker cooperatives?
Well, it's really varied. I mean, obviously, for many who may know of my career, I started at Capital Impact Partners, starting their government relations or lobbying program from scratch there. So I've got this policy vent, and you'll see a little bit of policy in the chapter talking about the SBA and how it relates to some of their loan guarantee programs and cooperatives. And then I left Capital Impact and came to the National Cooperative Bank. I was always proud to sponsor Everything Co-op, to do what we called at the time corporate affairs, which was a combination of community development as well as thought leadership in this space. And then many people.
Excuse me 1 second, John. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you're saying you're supporting, NCB has been our supporter, financial supporter, and cheerleader and team builder for almost 10 years now. And you said that came out of your corporate affairs department?
Not necessarily the support of it, but my role within that time after leaving Capital Impact, going into the bank. So there was a combination of me having this policy background, now with me trying to raise my business acumen and do more on the business development side. And I think that this chapter is a combination of both of those. And that's the combination of my policy piece or background and the combination of what we've done at the bank for so many years from a financing standpoint. And then last but not least, and we may get into this within the hour, is the founding of what is now an emerging community development loan fund, Rochdale Capital, which the bank founded in 2021, although we are a separate and unaffiliated organization. So I think in all that, this chapter really brings my entire career within the cooperative movement full circle, Vernon. and is why it was such a pleasure to write.
Okay. So you have the history, the experience. What about the education? What's your education like?
My education, formal education, is I'm a proud graduate of what is now the largest historical Black college and university in the country, North Carolina A&T State University. And then I mentioned before, Dr. Clamp was one of my professors when I was in the Southern New Hampshire in-person weekend program, as I call it, to get my master's in community economic development. And I've gone on from there to the Stonier Graduate School of Banking and have a certificate in diversity, equity, and inclusion from Cornell University. So I've tried to learn as much as I could while I could. I don't know if I can learn anything else, but I'll squeeze in what I can, Vernon. I will. But that's my formal education background.
All right, brother. So, young brother, you can always learn more. That's my view. You always learn.
I got you.
Always
never
learn.
Too old to learn.
Never.
I got you.
All right, so you got the background in terms of formal education. You got the experience at Capital Impact Partners, then NCB Bank, and now at Rochdale to write a chapter on financing worker cooperatives. And it's called Financing Worker Cooperatives, Challenges and Opportunities. So give me a couple of the challenges, not too many of them too quick. What's a couple of challenges?
Real quick, first and foremost, like many small businesses, there's a lack of access to capital. And I think that, for worker cooperatives who are trying to come in a post-pandemic and pre-pandemic world, it's hard to be able to find financial institutions that can provide you adequate financing, number one. Number two, most entrepreneurs or cooperators don't necessarily have a background in building, writing business plans and strategies and things of that nature. And so I think that that's where training and education come into play. So I think that's one of the bigger challenges, is that access to capital. And then I think number two, from an education standpoint, is just you've got federal programs and opportunities that people need to learn more about how the worker co-ops are structured. They need to learn more about what the benefits are to the community. They're already contributing nationwide to what's going on, but there needs to be an education component to that as well. And so you've got the lack of access and then the education piece that are two of the biggest barriers. But I think that the opportunities outweigh the barriers moving forward, especially in a post-pandemic world.
So before we get to opportunities, I'm still want to put on this lack of access to capital. That's for anybody. There's just not a lot for small businesses. And then you've got to be able to write the proposals and write the business plans, and that's the education. I want to make sure I get this other part of education. It sounds like you were saying to me, and tell me if I got it right or not, but you have to educate the government departments, divisions about what a co-op is. Is that what you're saying?
You do. I mean,
okay.
Listen, I think you've got situations now where, and I had Ariel Condra, who's the SVP of government programs from the bank, in the paper, where he talks about this ongoing effort to advocate the Small Business Administration around providing worker co-ops with the same guarantee opportunities or loan guarantee opportunities that many non-cooperative entrepreneurs get a chance to have. And so it could be a game changer. The bank was able to finance a food co-op in Fredericksburg, Virginia, using this loan guarantee, which was what any entrepreneur wants, an opportunity to be able to finance their business, but at the same time provide the financial institution some way to mitigate the risk by having a guarantee. And so I think that there's a broader piece of what we do that needs to be put out there. And what I tried to do in this chapter was give case studies or give geographically placed areas where various worker co-ops were trying to be financed. And so that's number one. And then number two, I tried to talk to a lot of co-op mission lenders, and I'm very grateful to them for their time, for giving us some of the answers to either what the problems were or what the opportunities are, and they are throughout the chapter as well. And so I think those are two big pieces, and I think that we're going to continue to advocate on behalf of worker co-ops to the SBA, as well as all federal agencies, because we really do feel that they are viable opportunities for Black and brown, indigenous, you name it, cooperators across the country to get their worker co-ops off the ground.
So You're hitting to my next question, black, brown, indigenous. So people that look like us. I've always found it to be hard to get capital. So if you say to me that it's hard to get capital for small businesses, no matter what across the table, it's even harder for black and brown and indigenous people to get capital. Is that part of the problem also?
Yeah, it's part of the problem also. I mean, again, there's a great case study in the chapter that talks about Chai Fresh Kitchen in Chicago. And here you're talking about, I wrote in here, formerly incarcerated people of color, primarily women, but I like to refer to them as returning citizens, who basically came together to form a co-op that was going to deliver, fresh food, healthy food, rooted in the culture of which the people that they served. And so you first of all, you walk in and you're formerly incarcerated. You don't have the background as it relates to a business plan and how to apply for these kind of things on a financial institution. And you're talking about the south and west sides of Chicago, and you're people of color. I mean, that's like statistically, how can this happen? But what they were able to do, number one, was win a co-op innovation award, which is one of the awards that's given to emerging co-ops that NCB and Capital Impact Partners and now Rochdale Capital sponsor, along with a few others. And they were able to take that grant program, expand some things in the business, and then which led to greater investment. And so it's just a great story. But think about the uphill climb that they had to have just to get financing and enough money to raise to buy the 6,000 square foot building that they needed. And much thanks to Shared Capital Co-op for them financing that. But again, I mean, if you have all of these things stacked against you and you're going into a mainstream bank, I'm not knocking the mainstream banks here. All I'm saying is that you have all of these things stacked against you. If you don't know how to address or find solutions to these problems, it's going to be a hard road to go in regards to getting financing. And I try to get that across as best I could in this chapter.
So I want to look at the stack a minute. So I understand Chai Fresh were women, 5 women that started it. They are African American. Or was there one Hispanic?
Multicultural. I mean, from what I remember, and I've met several of them. I know you've had many of them on your show. I want to say black, and there may be some mixed race or Latino in there as well. But majority people of color, all women, all formerly incarcerated, or returning citizens. So it is a minority-owned worker co-op.
So most of the time when you come out of, I have it that there are people that have had a problem with the law. I don't even call them returning, formerly incarcerated. They just had problems. Sometimes they haven't even they didn't do anything. They just had a problem with the law.
Right.
They had a problem with the law. They're coming back out of being incarcerated. They're minorities. They may not have the education, formal education or other, their business education. And they're saying, I want to start a business. Most of the time they can't find a job coming out of, okay.
In some states, they'll never be able to vote. So think about that as well. So that's also another roadblock.
So they're able to now start a business. Okay. I interviewed, I think, Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nimhart about the returning co-ops from formerly incarcerated people, and they have a recidivism rate of 3 to 5%, whereas 75% here.
Yes.
So if you can get into one of these, anybody out there formerly incarcerated, get into one of these co-ops, they have to create one. John, we have to take our first break. I'm anxious to get back to talk to you about some of the problems in more detail, but particularly want to get to the opportunities in some of these other cases. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial.
This is WOL News Talk 1450 AM and 95.9 FM 959.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Cooperative. John Holdsclaw is our guest. And so, John, we left talking about the problems, and we're talking about the problems of the people that formed Chai Fresh in Chicago. And you talked to us about the problems that people have, period, and that's lack of access to capital And then there's the education piece, the educating entrepreneurs to know how to run a business and write a business plan and fill out proposals and government and loan applications and all of that. And then trying to get government officials to understand what co-ops are, both of that. So CDFIs, Capital Impact Partners and Rochdale, or CDFI, what is a CDFI and how the two parts, what's a CDFI and how do they help to overcome some of the problems you've identified?
So, great question. A CDFI, Vernon, at its core and for those of you who hate acronyms like I do, CDFI stands for Community Development Financial Institution. They were created in the 1994 Regal Act to be essentially alternatives to banks. There was a great CDFI called Southern Bank Corps created in Arkansas at the time. President Clinton, or the former First Lady and Senator, was on the board of Southern Bank Corps, and it was modeled after another a bank in Chicago called, I think, South Shore. That said, they wanted to create something that people in under-resourced communities could go to provide financing and to be alternatives for banks. Capital Impact, Rochdale Capital are both loan funds. They're also community development banks. They're also community development credit unions that exist. And so today there are 1,380 CDFIs based all across the country that do this work. And so I think during the pandemic, when CDFIs became what we call the financial first responders for many Black businesses, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. 41% of Black entrepreneurs lost their businesses. 27% of Latino entrepreneurs lost their businesses during the pandemic. And so when they needed a place to go for financing or to get some help, they would go to community development banks, credit unions, and loan funds to help them. And so I think that you're starting to see, and I always tell people, I don't call it an industry. I call it the CDFI movement. I think you're starting to see the CDFI movement take even a greater role as this country continues on its recovery, number one, but I think also, two, as it relates to worker co-ops and other cooperative and community ownership opportunities. I think CDFIs provide one of the greatest chances or greatest opportunity for worker cooperatives as well as other Black and Brown, Indigenous, AAPI entrepreneurs and cooperators across the country, because there are already many across the country like Leaf in Boston and CFNE in the Northeast, and Shared Capital Co-op in the Midwest, Capital Impact Partners, Rochdale, who are already doing these kind of things. And again, it's our job as co-op mission lenders within this entire ecosystem for us to do our best to educate other CDFIs who are unaware of the opportunities and the need for capital that these worker co-ops have. And so in a nutshell, and I know that wasn't a really short nutshell, but again, I think you can hear my passion about the CDFI movement and how important I feel it is to the future of worker cooperatives and others, and all kinds of entrepreneur opportunities in the communities that we serve, which are under-resourced completely.
So what I got a lot out of that, but I want to go all the way back to 41% of Black small businesses lost their business through the pandemic.
41%.
41%. And 27% of Hispanics lost their business. Mm-hmm. John, I don't know if you know this number, but best guess, if it weren't for CDFIs, credit unions, and financial funds, how many more do you think would have lost their business?
You know, and that's a great question. Listen, I know the amount of billions that were contributed. I know the amount of Paycheck Protection Program numbers that were contributed. I don't have it in front of me, but I think the numbers would be a lot higher, Vernon. I think that people realize, many people who have been banking at these community development banks, many people who had already been members, those credit unions are cooperative, are community development credit unions, and not knowing that they had access to these resources. And I think that loan funds stepped up as well, many of whom all of whom are non-depository, but found a way to be innovative enough to use the Paycheck Protection Program as well. And so I can only imagine that if you did not have them in place in the communities that we serve, I mean, again, that 41 and that 27% was compared to 17% of white businesses that closed. So it shows you the gap there between the amount of businesses that shuttered. I would hate to even imagine what the numbers would have been like if CDFIs as financial first responders had not been there, Vernon. I don't even want to think the thought.
Okay. And off the top, I'm going maybe double, maybe been 82% of black businesses would have gone under. Because if you don't,
I know more than 50, maybe 60, 65%. I would go that high, but again, I think it's an opportunity, and I hope for many people who read this chapter, I hope it's their not necessarily their introduction to worker co-ops, because I think anybody who buys this book, and I encourage everyone to go out and go to successstore.com, and I think the paperback is out now. And although I have the ebook, I really want to have one to hold in my hand, and I hope that Chris Clamp and Michael Peck will sign it for me for sure. But that said, I think it's important that I also want to get across in this chapter that people who know about worker co-ops also get an opportunity to learn about community development financial institutions. And so I think that, and I hope that comes across in what we wrote, I just think that the conversations that I had with Shared Capital and Leaf and Geraldo and others, I think it's going to shed a lot of light on the opportunities that CDFIs can provide for worker co-ops. That's been one of the greatest joys for me in Rochdale, is that we meet so many amazing cooperators of color right now, and it makes me not only feel good about the present, but it makes me feel good about the future of the cooperative movement, and know that there is a deep bench of people who are doing some amazing things across this country. And while we can't necessarily finance all of them, I'm a big believer in saying that while we may not be able to provide you with the financial capital, we will provide you with as much relationship capital as we can to leverage those relationships to help you find someone or cobble together groups that can help finance these worker co-ops of color.
Fantastic. Now, Camille Kerr has been on the show a couple times, and she helped to start Chai Fresh. She was when we start talking about the ecosystem, in this chapter, you talked about they have to have the technical assistance, somebody to help them when they don't have the education, you don't know how to do the business plan, you don't know how to put everything together. There's technical assistance people throughout, and Camille Kerr, and she'll be on next week. She'll be on the show next week.
That's a can't miss episode right there for sure. So,
yeah.
And again, I'll say this till I'm blue in the face. I mean, this is what people also don't understand about CDFIs. There's a development services piece to what they do as well. I mean, we sometimes have to teach people how to borrow from us. We have to give them the financial literacy. We have to give them, and so there are people like Camille who are out here doing the invaluable work of taking worker owners or taking entrepreneurs and teaching them how to borrow money. It's something that some people take for granted, but for some folks, it's not something they know. Writing the business plan for Rochdale was tough for me because I had never technically written a business plan, and it was humbling. And I think it's important. And I think that, and I would definitely listen to that show next week because what Camille's doing in this space is invaluable. It really is.
Yeah, she's now a non-voting shareholder and a management consultant for Chai Fresh.
Nice.
I love talking about them. I wanted to get up and to Chicago and meet the people that started Chai Fresh. That's 5 folks that started it, and maybe hear their stories. Might even get them on a show. But before that one, let's talk more about, can you give us any opportunities? You're talking about the problems, the challenges. Or first, are there any other challenges besides the ones you've given?
No, I mean they are. I mean, I wouldn't want to take the time to do it now, but I will say this, Vernon. I mean, there's a part of the chapter that I had to include, and I see it as an opportunity whilst it remains a challenge. There's a piece in here that talks about CDFIs and racial equity. And I think that I'm a big believer in racial equity isn't a feeling. It's more than that. And I think that what I try to get across in the chapter is that it's more than just money. And it's about supporting cooperators of color. I think it goes without saying that the numbers are very, very low when it comes to cooperators of color. That said, I think that there's a part of the chapter where I talk about CDFIs and racial equity.
We have to come back and talk about that. We have to come back and talk about it after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. Welcome to Everything Co-op. Mr. John Holdsclaw is our guest today. And John used to work for the National Co-op Bank, and we've already mentioned that NCB has been our sponsor for the last 9+ years, almost 10 years now. NCB's mission is to support and be an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, especially in low-income communities, by providing innovative financial and related services. And those low communities often are black and brown communities, but they have been a great, great partner for us. So, John, Rochdale came out of NCB. Chuck Snyder, this is one of the things he wanted to do before he passed away.
Yeah, it is, Bert. And let me correct you for one thing. I still technically work for the National Cooperative Bank. I'm dual titled, so I'm still a bank officer, and then also the CEO of Rochdale. So I don't formally work for NCB anymore. I'm still a bank officer, but this was definitely something that Chuck wanted to be his legacy. He wanted Rochdale to be not only a place to provide financial capital in under-resourced communities, but I think he also wanted it to be a place of thought leadership. And we probably will talk about that a little later, but this definitely was what his intention was, and what we as a staff and the board and what we try to do on a daily basis in regards to staying as close to that desire that he had for this organization as possible. So he's definitely missed, but he's never too far away in a lot of our activities that we do on a daily basis.
So he's such a visionary. Dr. Chris Clamp and Michael Peck told me that they dedicated the book to him because he brought the two of them together. He said they told me, he said, I don't know what you all are going to do together, but you all should meet each other, so something you all do. And so this book is part of that meeting and introduction of them. So you were talking about racial equity before we took the break. You want to finish that?
And I won't spend much time on it. I just think that it's important. And there's a great piece in here where the executive director of the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast talks about how, although they have not a very diverse staff, that the amazing efforts that they go through to try to be able to reach and work in communities of color. And I think it's something that people should all be aware of. And I also think that it's something that we as a cooperative movement, as well as the CDFI movement, need to be aware of. It's something that I've taken a great deal of pride of being an advocate for throughout my time in the entire bank enterprise. And so, again, I would just encourage people to go there. But the one thing that we haven't talked about, too, is that, we're in an aging country. And there's one case study in Washington State that I would definitely want people to look at that talks about a business that had been in operation for 40 years. And then, of course, the founders and owners were approaching retirement. Yep. And then it talks about how the long-term managers in a 5-year transition plan were able to work with shared capital. I think they approached a bank. And again, it's a perfect example of them with this solid 5-year plan, but they could not get the bank loan. And then, they were told that they were not bankable. And so there was no access to an SBA loan guarantee, no way to mitigate the risk for the bank. And so Shared Capital Co-op stepped in and basically, sold to 5 of the 18 employees for it to be a worker co-op to own. And I can imagine that when I say innovative financing, I can imagine the type of innovative financing that it took to get them at a place where they felt as if they could mitigate the risk. Also, in combination of taking those 5 now cooperative owners and basically teaching them how to borrow from shared capital co-op. And so, if there's no case study within the chapter that encapsulates, every aspect of what we've talked about since 1030, Vernon, that alone talks about the conversion. It talks about the education of teaching folks to borrow. It talks about what they did with the absence of a SBA program, and then what type of innovation it took for shared capital co-op to do the loan. And so I think it really speaks to the power of cooperation, but also to the amazing opportunity that CDFIs have and can play moving forward in this space.
So, if it's in Washington State, I would, and it's been in business for 40 years, I would imagine that's majority people trying to get the loan. I would imagine. So they couldn't get the loan. They've been in business for 40 years. They've got a great plan. They have the income from the business as potential collateral. They have a lot of things going for them, and they still, because it's a worker-owned co-op that they're looking at going into with these individuals owning it, then the bank says, I don't have one person that I can go get collateral from, their home, their house, their car, their boat, their stocks, or I don't have his collateral. I've got the business, but that's not bankable? That doesn't.
Yes. Yeah. And there's no SBA program that at that time that would take all 5 of those potential borrowers as the guarantor. And so with that, I think that there's a lot more work to be done on the SBA side to get them along. I think we've worked really hard, RL, the bank, as well as NCBA and others, to get SBA across the finish line to provide more guidance for this again. But they are losing the opportunity to help some very passionate and wonderful cooperators of color and non-cooperators of color achieve their dream, especially as we age and you hear folks talk about the silver tsunami and all this kind of stuff in this country. There's no reason that a business that has been operating for 40 years and making profit, when the owners decide to retire, that the entire business should shutter when the employees want to be able to purchase it. There's no reason that should happen at all. And it's something that I think many businesses, and Project Equity does an amazing job of working with these folks on trying to help them doing these conversions. But again, they don't finance, but at the same time, they do a great job of helping them convert.
It's interesting listening to you because Christina Jennings from Shared Capital has been on the show. Project Equity has been on the show, and they do a really great job also. So they've been on Everything Co-op. But John, I want to change now to talk about Rochdale. What are some of the things that you're doing? You started in 2021, you said. That's only a year and a half, 2 years. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you're doing at Rochdale now?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the bank. The bank has been an amazing founding and strategic partner. Started us off with a generous contribution that we've worked very hard to stay true to our cooperative roots.
And the bank is National Cooperative Bank, right? When you say
the National Cooperative Bank, okay. Yes, the National Cooperative Bank. And again, we are separate and unaffiliated. So thank you for the clarification. We are separate and unaffiliated, but I'm very thankful for their support. I've got the best chief loan officer in the country, and I've got the best operations and compliance manager in the country. And we're big on 3 things, Vernon. We're big on, number 1, living our brand. Number 2, we're big on the fact that we are serious about our advancement of equity, diversity, and inclusion. We're proud that we have a majority-minority board. And then last but not least, we're very proud of the fact that, again, if we can help you with financial capital, that we will do all that we can to help you with relationship capital. And so we've had 4 loans thus far, one to a majority Black limited equity co-op in Crenshaw, in California. We bought in on a loan with the bank for a food co-op in the north end of Detroit. That's majority Black, and it's the first transit-oriented development in the city's history. We've got a self-standing loan with City of Refuge in South Baltimore, a very diverse community who wants to become a resiliency hub, and that they're going to take solar panels and have battery power with enough for 72 hours if there's a power outage for people to charge their laptops or phones, keep their medicine refrigerated. And then last but not least, we work with the bank on a grocery deal in the South Shore of Chicago. And so those are two good examples of what we're doing. We only work in communities of color. So again, Black, Latino, AAPI, or Indigenous. And again, our demand right now is really over the roof right now. We've got some amazing opportunities here moving forward. Our pipeline is long. Number one. Number two, I always tell people that I go to bed thinking about capitalization or raising money for Rochdale, and then I wake up in the morning thinking about raising money for Rochdale, because we're not a depository institution. But going back to Chuck, being a strong believer in thought leadership, we really feel strongly that thought leadership equals capital, equals more of an opportunity for us to have more impact. So if you give me an opportunity, I'd love to tell you about something we're doing next week when you have a chance.
Okay. So I just want to go back and make sure I understand these 4 loans you have out, because I heard LA, Detroit, Baltimore, and Chicago.
Yes.
Both coasts and in the middle. So LA, though, was that a limited equity housing co-op you invested in?
It was a limited equity housing co-op. Yep, it was. And the bank had a few share loans within the building, but they also needed a new roof, some new siding, and some other things. And they didn't have, obviously, the money for that. And so we were able to purchase a part of the loan from the bank that was then used for them to make some of those improvements from a roof standpoint, and siding and painting and whatnot. And so, again, it's majority Black, limited equity co-op. Anybody who knows that Crenshaw part of LA knows that it's 93% Black.
Was that a part of the downtown Crenshaw Rising?
No, it was not a part of downtown Crenshaw Rising. Obviously, we are very familiar with that effort and everything that Damien and his group is doing there, which is just, phenomenal. And I'm so glad they're in the fight. But it was not a part of that.
Okay. And I know the Detroit Food Co-op, was that Malik?
Yep. That was Malik. Yep, that's him and his group of Detroit Food Security. And it's going to be more than just the food co-op. It's really going to be a building for the community. They're going to have spaces there for meetings. They're going to have spaces there for students to come there after school and do study halls and do computer training. And so, again, it's all about concern for community, their principle 7. So I'm super excited about that. And then you throw on top of that, the first transit-oriented development in the city of Detroit is tied to a cooperative. I mean, that can't be said enough. And so I'm really excited about our involvement in that, and we'll definitely be there on that grand opening day, because, again, it's going to be so great for the community, and just to have that access. And if you notice, I don't say low and moderate income much anymore, Vernon. I try to say under-resourced, because at the end of the day, it's all about access. Mm-hmm. Access to health, access to healthy food, access to food security. So I'm trying to get myself away from talking about, distressed or underserved or low and moderate income communities. They're just starting to feel like they have a negative connotation to me. So I'm just trying to roll with under-resourced, and I wish
and try to get them some resources.
There you go.
Okay.
Exactly.
So we're going to take our final break, and when I come back, I really want to talk more about Rochdale and what you're doing. I understand you have a symposium or conference coming up here. You're going to convene some people here next week. So we'll talk about that when we come back. But it is amazing. You're in 4 parts of the country, both coast and in the middle, with all kinds of different projects. It sounds like it'd be a fun job to be in. Okay. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial.
News Talk 1450 WOL AM, where information is power.
Information is power. And Papa Sin said that first October that we were on, Papa Sin is from Senegal. and he was here. He was getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. He said, it's not the knowledge that gives you the power. It's putting the knowledge into action. It's not until you get into action that you have the power. So we're telling you, John Holdsclaw is telling everybody out there about worker co-ops and getting them financed and getting the knowledge you need to start a business and working together. You got to get in action, though. That's what I'm hopeful that conversations like this will cause more and more people to get in action. And my heart leaps when you tell me, and Esteban Kelly from U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives said it too, that most of the worker co-ops that are forming now are black and brown people. And so as my mother said, get a good education, John, so you can get a good job. Now I'm saying get an education. You may work for a while in a good job, but you want to start your own business, create some good jobs. And my last point, that co-op was in Italy, but it was inside the prison, the bakery co-op inside the prison in Italy, Giotto. And that's the one they had this recidivism rate of 3 to 5%. So because it was both inside the prison and outside, and so people working inside the prison to make breads and everything that bakers make, when they got out, they had a job. Not only have a job, they had a share, they had ownership, they had community. No, you're not going back. So I would love to see us do that here also. But tell us, what are some of the things you're doing in Rochdale?
Well, one of the things we're doing, and again, we're super excited about it, next week on Tuesday, we're holding a convening. Listen, we remain true to our cooperative roots and always will. Even our logo has the 7 rays of the sun, which represent the 7 principles. But the other component of this that works for us is that, we also want to do our part from a community ownership standpoint. And so next Tuesday, we're holding our first ever convening. Very small group of folks, many of whom are from co-op mission lenders. Somebody's from the Car Seat Institute. We've got a Baltimore-based community loan fund. We have some philanthropic representatives as well to try to do what we can to take the cooperative principles and integrate them into this thought of community ownership. And again, this is where, Chuck's whole thought leadership was very important. And so we're doing that next Tuesday, and I'm really excited about it. And we're going to tell them off the top, you're not here to listen to us. You're here because we want to pick your brains about what this definition should mean to Rochdale, about what foundation should we take from the cooperative principles and this whole concept of a community ownership model. You talked about Damien and Crenshaw Rising. I mean, that was a great example of an opportunity for a community to come together to bid for this, important Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza Mall. I'm a big fan of Andre Perry's, and he jointly wrote a piece about that mall. But in the very beginning of it, it talks about the famous post-Civil War initiative known as 40 Acres and a Mule. And when General Sherman promised newly freed black households, that, they would be able to sustain their freedom, there was a one black minister by the name of Garrison Fraser who told the general, he said, freedom means having the ability to reap the fruit of your own labor, of our own labor. And obviously, for the historians out there, President Johnson overturned the overall decision. And even to this day, a half a century later, there's still this unfulfilled promise of land ownership for many of the descendants of many of those enslaved individuals. And so the struggle continues. And so what we're trying to do as an organization who's living their brand, supporting equity, diversity, and inclusion, and also leveraging that relationship capital, we're trying to come up with our definition that melds the cooperative principles and community ownership together, because it's too vitally important to this country. Land retention, home ownership, entrepreneurship, worker co-ops, limited equity co-ops, all of these things that when you talk to people, I love during my time in my lobby days when I would go on the Hill and somebody would not understand what a co-op was, and I would say to them, well, let me ask you, are you a member of the Congressional Credit Union, or are you a member of the U.S. Senate Credit Union? And they'd say, oh yes, we're proud members. Well, then you're a member of a co-op. and then the light bulb would go off. And so, with that said, I think there's a lot more work for us to do. We're excited about the convening next week. We're excited about what's going to come out of it. We're going to produce a convening document that's going to come out of it that I would love to obviously share with many of the listeners here, as well as cooperatives of color, as well as, any other folks in the industry and movement. So, again, this is the hardest fun I've ever had, Vernon. It really is.
Hardest fun. Okay.
Hardest fun, man. This is the hardest fun I've ever had. And some days I get up, but again, I have a passion for it. Chuck's the wind behind our sails. And then when something like the book comes out, I mean, it's like putting the cherry on top. And again, I'm so proud of Michael and who I call MAP. Wouldn't be a show talking about Michael if I didn't say MAP.
Michael Allen Peck.
Dr. Clamp, who always tells me to call her Chris, but I will continue to call her Dr. Clamp. When she was editing my chapter, I thought I was back in Southern New Hampshire a couple times with some of her edits, and I was having some flashbacks to 04 and 06 when she was a professor of mine. But with that said, that's the type of collective effort that it takes to get this complete message across.
So this convening you're having now, talking about how you incorporate the principles into the CDFI world, I just want to make sure everybody out there know that the cooperative principles are guidelines by which the cooperative values are put into practice. And the cooperative values is self-help. Now, like it starts there, John, self-help. We have to help ourselves. Self-responsibility, democracy, one member, one vote, equality, equity, and solidarity. It starts with self-help, but working together in solidarity. So that group that started Chai Fresh, everybody has one vote, all five of them. When they get ready to make a decision, they make the decision on what's best for the group, and everybody gets help. They help themselves while they're helping the group. So this is why I love co-ops. And we don't have time to go through the principles, but I like what you're convening. And if I just looked at my calendar, I'm booked up on next Tuesday. I would love to have been there, if nothing else, just listening. So when you look at the opportunities in the next 3 minutes we have or so here, 3-4 minutes, what do you see Rochdale doing to help the future of worker co-ops?
I see Rochdale as a huge supplement to the already existing efforts that are going on. There are many co-op mission lenders across the country who are working to get these worker co-ops financed. There's advocates like the bank and NCBA and others who are trying to get the SBA across the finish line. There are thought leaders out here who are writing things like the Dr. Clamps of the world and the MAPs. We want to be a part of all of that, man. We want to be a part of every effort as from a financial standpoint, to an advocate standpoint, to a relationship standpoint or thought leadership standpoint. But at the same time, Vernon, we want to bring other people along. We want to bring folks that may not necessarily know about financing worker co-ops. And so if we can find a replicable model as co-op mission lenders for others to take on as CDFIs, then we're going to do it. And so I just think that I'm a big believer of leaving it all in the field. And that's what I hope to do when the day is done. So that's what I'm hoping in a nutshell.
Okay. So you mentioned a book. I need you to tell people how they can go find the book.
So to go find the book, I would go to successstore.com. Number one, there is an ebook version for many of you who like ebooks. I like to hold something in my hand. So you can also buy the paperback version. If I'm not mistaken, just came out. There's also Oak Tree Press. That is the founder and publisher. Oak Tree Press is another place to go get it. I would definitely encourage everyone in this country as well as globally. Again, 36 contributors from 6 countries on 3 continents. I know that there's an effort to have it translated into other languages, but I would definitely start at successstore.com. And if not, reach out to me on any social media avenue or outlet, and or email me if you have my email. And let me also say that the co-editors' royalties from this are going to go and be donated to some social economic missions and others, that believe strongly in that one contributor, one vote model.
Okay. We're about ready to get off the air, but where have you decided where you want, as a contributor, where you would want your proceeds to go to? What organization?
I would, and I trust Dr. Clamp and MAP with this. I would want it to go to any cooperators of color or any organization based in that. I think it's important. There's a rich history here for Black and Brown and AAPI folks. That's where I'd like for it to go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your time. Everybody out there, we'll see you next Thursday. Please live cooperatively.
News Talk 1450 WOL AM, where information is power.